When I lived in Lazenby, obviously the mines were still running. Only for a couple of years. I moved into Lazenby in 1947 and the mines closed in 1949. The last shift came out of the trustee drift in Eston at that time. And it was the end of a 100-year era when fortunes were made and the landscape was devastated by iron mining, as it is in wherever mining takes place. You can see it in coal mining areas as well. And there were many old miners who lived in a village. And I took it upon myself to chat to them about it, about their experiences. And one in particular was a chap called Stan Elderfield. I think I've called him George on the video. His name was Stan, or Ston they called him. And he was one of several. There was another guy called Bodger Lewis. I mean, Stan Elderfield and Bodger Lewis are both on the photographs of the last shift coming out at Trustee. But there were other people, like there was another fellow called Siggy Wilkes and Brightons. And it's fascinating to listen to their tale. And of course, they didn't realise just how important this was in terms of social history. So this is a video of the relics of the mines and some photographs of the mines as they were in their heyday, particularly Pit Top, or Upsall Pit, or Barnaby Moor, whatever you want to call it. There are dozens of books about mining in Cleveland, and particularly in Eston, which was the biggest of them all. But one I would recommend to you is Ironstone Mining in Eston by a fellow called Bill Brighton. He describes the life of a miner very, very well, and the social conditions which they had in Eston at that time, just before the mines closed. It's a fascinating read. This is a little plan of the mining royalties, Eston Mines. So we start over here at Eston, and this is the Guybo fan house, and there used to be a farm here, the remains of which is still there if you look for it very carefully amongst the newly planted plantation. And you can see just how big that Wilton royalty was, enormous. This is the 1853 map of Eston. This is the A174 now, and this is where it goes down around Eston Square. And you can see this is Jubilee Road. And you can see this was all just fields. There was nothing there at all. There was a farm there. That was it. And if you come across, this was the railway which came up here, and this is the tramway. These were the original miners' cottages in that little triangular block there. They were back-to-back houses. They didn't have a back door. They only had a front door. And this is the original tramway. This is up to Old Drift. This is the original drift into Eston Mines. This is called Old Bank. And this is the new bank, which led up to the tramway, which eventually went all the way to Challoner Pit. And down here was a little farm called Tiplins, and there was some sidings there called Tiplin sidings. And these buildings here were the stables for the horses, big horses they used in the man, not like pit ponies, they were great big horses. And you'll notice that there is no incline to the last drift to close, Trustee Drift at Eston. It hadn't been built by at this time. And if we just shift across, this is the top of Newbank, and this is what is now the tramway, and that was as far as it had got, just above Lazenby into this. There was a quarry there. That was as far as it went. And just continuing a little further. Here you can see Park Farm. When I was a kid, you could still see the remains of that. And the garden, it had a great big black currant bush in it, I remember. But there you can see the scene, as it says there, it had been quarried off and all the spoil had been left. This is Agar's Gill, which is just above Lazenby. And this was Lazenby Bank Road. Eventually the tramway went under there, and somewhere around about here is where the SS Castle was built, a big gable fan. So this was 1953, this was 4 years after the mines closed. But you can see just how massively Eston had expanded. There were the original houses, the little triangle which you saw on the 1853 map. And by this time, of course, Trustee Incline had been built. Just move it across. You can also see at this time that South Lackenby had been built. It wasn't on the earlier map. And if we just follow the tramway along, you can see all the spoil from when they quarried it all the way along here. We used to call this the tips as kids. We're covered in vegetation now. And here was where Lazenby Bank Road came across the tramway, and that's where the bridge is with a date 1871 on it. This is the SS Castle, which is, or the gable fan house, which has been built since 1853. It wasn't there. So, and the tramway came all the way along here to this point. This is Wilton Lane, by the Gisborough. And the old tramway, the original, went under a tunnel here, down this cutting, and under this little bridge, this tunnel, into Lovell Hill Quarry. And there you can see Lovell Hill Farm, where the Caddies lived. It was pulled down, donkey's years ago, I would think probably in the 60s. and this is the site of the Wilton hauler, which was still there. So when they extended the tramway to Gisborough in 1914, it was, up till that point, all the iron ore from Challoner Pit at Gisborough went through Eston mines underground. But when they started taking the iron ore out from the pillars, causing the whole lot to collapse in, then that wasn't possible. So the iron ore from Challoner Pit had to come overground rather than underground. So this tramway was built for that purpose. So the new tramway went under Wilton Lane at a different bridge, which had a date stone. I'm almost certain it was 1914, but it could have been 1918. And here it went over the tunnel where the old tramway went underneath. That bridge is still there, it's blocked off with farm rubbish at either end, and then came down this area here. So from 1839, Eston grew enormously. All the villages, Lackenby and Lazenby, building projects took place, and there was a massive immigration of people from all over the United Kingdom to work in the mines. It was a sort of Klondike. It was like a gold rush. Although they were very dangerous places to work, and there is a website which details everyone who was killed in Eston mines and what happened to them. I think it's the Durham Miners or mining website. So if you're looking for relatives who worked in Eston mines or died in Eston mines, the information is given there. And some of them are very, very young, no more than boys. Very little remains of Eston mines. This was where the old drift went up, the original tramway, and another tramway went across to where this gorse is, and that was the last one to close in 1949 when the lease was up. And they run down behind those houses there where those trees are into the tip yard. And all that greenery is, that was all the spoil from Eston mines. It's all been levelled out now. And there was a third incline came up through the trees here in the foreground, which led to it was called Newbank, and it led to the tramway all the way along Eston Hills to Challoner Pit near Gisborough. You can't see it now for the trees. And this is what remains of the tramway along the side of Eston Hills, running from Challoner Pit near Gisborough all the way around to Eston, where they used to haul sets of trucks along there by cable. It's much more overgrown now. And this is where the tramway runs under Lazenby Bank Road, and this has a date stone on it there, 1871. The Lazenby Bank Road, track over from Lazenby over to Gisborough. You can see by that date stone there it was built in 1871. And this is looking towards Eston. And this is a view of the bridge looking east. Can't see the date stone for vegetation. This seam of ironstone was 11 foot thick, even more in places. And it was on the left hand side as we look along this tramway towards Eston. And you could see it on the surface. And what they did was they quarried it to begin with. So they quarried all the way along here. And they tipped the spoil on the right hand side, all this shale here which is now covered with vegetation. And eventually when they had to take off too much from the top of the ironstone to get at it, they then started putting drifts into the hillside. And there used to be lots of drifts along here. Oh, they've all gone long since. No, not even any evidence of them now. But even when all this had gone, this is the Lowther royalty. They had to pay the Lowthers of Wilton Castle every wagon load of iron ore that crossed here from Challoner Pit. They had to pay a due. So even when the Wilton royalty was completely worked out, there was money still to be made by sets of wagons trundling along here to Eston Pit and down into the tip yard. This is the Guyble fan house at Lazenby. We knew it was the SS Castle because it had these reinforcing SS's, one and you can see them there. This was taken in 1967 before all the trees grew up and vandals got to it. It's in a terrible mess now, covered with paint and all sorts of graffiti. It was used to provide ventilation to the mines. They used to blow air down. There's a sort of drift here. The air used to get blown down there. Inside this bit here was a huge fan, and it was powered by an engine here. It was steam powered initially, but then in 1918 it was all converted to electricity. This is a view of it from the other side. You can see the drift going in there much better. And alongside the SS Castle, when I was a lad in the 50s, were a couple of scrap army tanks. You can see a friend of mine sitting on top of one there. It's a great place for dividing into two groups and having some giant catapult fight. Usually ended when somebody got belted with a brick above the eye and started bleeding profusely. Everything then came to a stop. Sometime in the 50s the scrap men came and removed them. which is a great shame. And this is the SS Castle in 1987. Relatively graffiti free, and it has a little humorous bit on there. I suppose it was before the days of aerosol cans. It's in a terrible mess. It's called the SS Castle for obvious reasons, these big reinforcing rings on the end. The SS, this shaft here. And you can see where it went down into the mine, down that drift there at the back. You used to be able to get in it, but it's all sealed off now with very heavy doors. You can't actually go down, the drift was blocked off, you couldn't go very far. And this is the SS Castle. It was a guyable fan for pushing air down into the mines to ventilate them. Now it's just a great mass of graffiti. It's a Grade 2 listed building, believe it or not. It's a hell of a mess. But the trees have grown up enormously round it. This is the tramway that runs from the top of Newbank in Eston. It used to carry wagons on rails pulled by ropes, wire hawser, all the way to Challoner Pit at Gisborough. And just where these bricks are, here, this brick wall, in there used to be the remains of Park Farm, which vanished years ago due to subsidence. This whole area is just masses of subsidence everywhere. You can see this is the SS Castle, and you can see this whole area called the Park. It was in fact Park Farm. Park Farm used to be in here, but due to subsidence it was eventually demolished. But you can see all the way across here where the Gulf has collapsed and produced all these ponds. Dozens and dozens and dozens of these ponds, which used to contain newts. In fact, one of them had a large goldfish in it, a sort of koi. I remember a lad catching it and taking it home. We were really annoyed about it, and it only lasted a couple of days before it died off in his bath. The lad was called Dave Macaulay. And they forested it or planted it all up with trees, and all the newts and fish, and they all disappeared as the larchwood grew up. And here you can see where the mines have collapsed. And all these little ponds, hundreds of them. They contained all sorts of things, fish in there and newts. It was a great place to spend some time during your summer holidays. One of them contained a great big goldfish. It must be a foot long. I remember we spent ages trying to catch it. A lad called Dave Macaulay caught it and took it home, unfortunately, and it died. We were all a bit annoyed about it. And just to the east of the SS Castle is a big concrete block. I don't know what it's for, but you can see where the cables have come off the drum sheaves and have been wearing away along the side of this big concrete block. What a mess they've made. And on this dog leg on the tramway was this massive concrete structure. I never knew what it was. It obviously held something substantial, looking at those bolts on the top. And here you can see evidence of the ropes. Where they've been going around this corner, they've obviously come off the drum sheaves, a sort of lubricated bobbins, and cut into this concrete here in a big way. And this is where the tramway went down under Wilton Lane to Lovell Hill Quarry. Again, this is 1967, and I think most of those props there have collapsed. So it's a pretty unsafe place to go, but it's still there. So the original tramway used to come along here from the SS Castle, and it went under Wilton Lane here. It's blocked off at the other end. When I was younger, it all used to be propped up, but all the props have gone. And Wilton Lane runs across the top of this. And the new branch of the tramway was put through in 1918, and it went under Wilton Lane at this point here. Used to be a date stone there. And then further along, where it turned to go to Challoner Pit, it went across the top of the old tramway going into Lovell Hill Quarry. And there's a big tunnel there, but it's been blocked off at both ends. There's a big concrete tunnel, quite long, because they cross one another at diagonals. And the first fella through this tunnel was a fella called George Elderfield, who was a deputy, lived at Lazenby. He was on the photograph of the last shift leaving Eston Pit. I had a long conversation with him about mining, but that's another project altogether. This is Lovell Hill Quarry. When the quarry was finished, it filled up with water, and after a couple of drownings, ICI decided they were going to drain it, so it's all been drained off there. And then they planted it up with trees, so you can't see that now. This was 1967. And this is the Wilton Hauler in 1918. You can see the cables going in there on the right hand side. And this pulled the sets of trucks from the Moordale hauler across Lovell Hill to Wilton Lane, which is just behind this building. In the 50s it was still there. In the 50s and 60s it was still there. Used as a farm building, just a barn for storing hay predominantly. Eventually vandals set it on fire, and that was the end of it. It's a great shame. I'm standing on Wilton Lane at Lovell Hill. This is where Wilton Hauler used to stand here. And that's the tramway going along there. It used to go to Challoner. This is where Lovell Hill Farm used to stand, just where those cows are there. And just over there is Lovell Hill Quarry. You can just see it there, just behind that black base there. And if you follow the tramway across, this was an area we used to call the swamps. It's now a site of scientific interest. And this air shaft is still there, sticking up above the field. This is remains of the Eston mines. This is an air shaft on Lovell Hill along Wilton Lane. The limitations of YouTube mean that this video has had to be divided up. So this is just the end of the first part, and there'll be a second part following on.